Candidates from our House of Representatives races and also from our Senate, state Senate races here this evening. The format will be this. At the beginning, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make an introductory statement. The senatorial candidates will speak first, and the order of the speaking has been done by drawing straws or things out of a paper bag or whatever. Then the representatives will speak after that. After the candidates have all had an opportunity to speak, we will go to questions from the audience here. If a question is not directed to an individual, then any candidate who chooses can respond to it. If it is directed to an individual, that person answers first, and any opponent of that person has an opportunity to answer if they so choose. This will last 1 hour. We will finish promptly at 8 o'clock because, as we were just discussing, some other lower level candidates also have a debate this evening, and some people might want to see that. Who knows? So with that, our first speaker this evening will be candidate for Senate, Russ Olson. Russ?
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate everyone for coming out tonight, even those of you that have been forced to come here for a paper or class credit. We appreciate seeing you out here. As Jack said, my name is Russell Olson. I'm currently the state senator for District 8, and actually wanted to take the opportunity to thank my fellow candidates on both the House and Senate side for taking the time to run for the legislature. Serving in the legislature in South Dakota takes a tremendous amount of time away from your personal and professional life, and so these folks have been out on the campaign trail, and I just wanted first time to publicly thank them for wanting to be part of our process. My very first piece of actual legislation in Pierre, when I first got elected to the House of Representatives, was a bill that I carried on behalf of DSU. So I think it's fitting to see all the DSU students that are here tonight in the crowd, and to talk a little bit about DSU and how I've tried to make DSU an important university in the state of South Dakota. The very first bill, it didn't seem like it was that important of a bill. It seemed like a bill that made sense, which is how every lobbyist will ever come up to you and tell you this is a no-nonsense bill. And this one did sound like it made sense. It was the laptops that the students were using, they had to actually give them back, and they were leasing them throughout their time as students here, and at the end of the lease they had to give them back rather than buy them. Well, because of our surplus property laws in South Dakota, they had to do that. They weren't able to purchase those without competitive bids and the whole thing. So I said, yeah, I'll work with you, Dr. Nolan, we'll get that changed. Well, that sounded like an easy bill until, like I said, entering the lobbyists. The South Dakota retailers didn't think it was such a good idea to have a tax-supported entity competing with private business and selling of laptops. And so we worked that deal out and showed them how it made sense. We were only going to do it in the bookstores. We weren't looking to compete against Radio Shack downtown or any of that, so we worked out our differences there. And that was the first piece of legislation I had on behalf of DSU. Since then, the level of importance for our bills dealing with DSU has significantly went up, and we're planning on the future for DSU and making sure that as far as information security goes and our national security goes, with everything that's going on with DSU, that everybody in Pierre knows what an important player this university is to our state. With that, I'll stand by for questions when the time is appropriate, and I'd appreciate your support on November 6th.
Russ. The other candidate for Senate from our area is Charlie Johnson. Charlie?
Thank you, Jack, and people here in the audience tonight. Thank you for coming out on a busy evening. My reason in running is to give people a choice here in District 8. I've been involved with government and concern for government for years. I'm a former county commissioner. Also ran for school board when I was just 18 years old. I ran for state senate one time previously to this, back in 1984. So what comes around, and so I'm running again. I also have strong ties to the community. I've lived here in Lake County my entire life. I have farmed since the early 1980s. My claim to fame is that I moved a half mile down the road from where I was born. I was born in the president's office here on campus. I went to college here, graduated from high school here, spent some time in what used to be a fireside lounge back to the north here in the student union. Took several naps between classes. I graduated from 1980 here with a degree in business administration. Had an option to go to law school at that time, declined that, and became a small farm advocate. And then tragedy struck our family when my dad suffered a stroke back in the early 80s, and we've been farming ever since, carrying on the legacy of my father. I believe in three major issues that I like to have my campaign focus on. One is education for all ages. Secondly is improvement in infrastructure in our state. And thirdly is to provide opportunities for our youth to develop a future where they can succeed and prosper in this state. And I will keep my focus on those three major issues. I really believe that if we want to maintain the best of educators in our classroom, we need to follow the 3 R's. Retain, recruit, and respect. And I'll leave it at that. We will answer any questions later. Thank you.
Okay, now we will move on to our candidates for State House. One thing that they will probably remind you of, but I would like to remind you of, is of the 4 candidates that are here this evening, you will be voting for 2 of these gentlemen. So there will be 2 votes in our election coming up in November for these races. So keep that in mind as you listen to their presentations. The first person to speak for House candidacy tonight is Roy Lindsay. Roy?
I'd also like to thank the AAUW for hosting this. I'm Roy Lindsay. My wife Kathy and I have lived in Madison since 1978. I taught vocational courses, auto mechanics, carpentry, welding, basic electricity at Madison High School for 33 years. I retired 2 years ago. We also have Subway restaurants here in Madison and in Del Rapids. We have a laundromat in Del Rapids, and then we have farmland in Moody and Lake counties. So the legislature has been something that I've followed for a number of years. There's been times in that when I've been out there, spoken to the legislators to give my 2 cents on something that was going on in Pierre at that point in time. Now that I'm retired and have a little more time, I've spent a little more time looking at what's going on. I'm an advocate of education, and I've not been very happy with the reduction in funding for education over the last 10 or 12 years. And so that is one of the focuses that I intend to aim toward when I'm in Pierre. Education is something that brings business to a state. If you have an educated workforce, if you have an educated citizenry, people and companies want to move there. They also want to come to an area that has recreation, and Madison has recreation available to it, as well as many of the cities that we have in the state of South Dakota. So it isn't just no income tax, no corporate tax that's going to bring business. It's the rest of what makes up the populace, the population, the cities where people want to live. So education is one of the things that is very dear to me. It's something I spent 38 years doing, and we have 8 children. All of them graduated from Madison High School, and we have all of them except the last 2. That we have 2 that are still in college, finishing up college now. But all of our kids have gone on for further education and have done well. 4 of our students have gone to out-of-state schools, no 5. Linnell went to Iowa, and 4 of the others went to Nebraska. We have a daughter who graduated from DSU. She is, and I'm probably going to misstate this, but she's CEO of Credit Soup, or Bulldog Media Group here in Madison. So DSU has been very good to our family as well. We also have a nephew who has graduated from here. So I'm Roy Lindsay. I appreciate your consideration for House of Representatives, District 8. Thank you.
One other note that we would make as we go forward, the American Association of University Women local chapter has provided refreshments. They're here on this table, and they encourage you to take those at any time that you would like to have them. Okay, our next speaker for House candidacy is Scott Parsley. Scott?
Thank you, Jack. Good evening. Thank you to the AAUW for hosting this tonight. We always appreciate these forums and the opportunity to come out and talk about our views and hear, more importantly, hear what the concerns and issues are on the minds of the voters, because that's who we're to represent, is the folks who are out here in DSU and other parts of our community and our district. As Jack said, my name is Scott Parsley. I live here in Madison. I'm married to Val. She's sitting right here in front. She was also born in the president's office at DSU, so not at the same time, Charlie. So it's interesting when you talk to people who were born in the president's office. We have raised 3 children in this community. Our youngest is about to graduate from high school. Kind of a sad year for us and a happy year at the same time. We have a lot of lasts that are happening, and those lasts aren't necessarily all that much fun, but it's fun to see our kids go and make their way in the world and do the things that they want to do and see their successes. And I think that's what this is all about in terms of our legislature, in terms of our state, is how do we make successes out of all the people of our state? And that's what I'm interested in, is working with people of our state to improve our education system. We have a great education system today. Just look at our test scores. We probably don't compensate our teachers the way we should. In fact, I know we don't. But we're going, I think, the wrong way in our education system. We have made significant and severe cuts to that good system in the last 2 years. And we need to start filling that up again. We need to start bringing those dollars back into that system. Our state has a lot of elderly people. That's just part of the nature of our state. We also have a lot of low-income people. We are one of the states with the lowest income per capita in the nation. So we have a lot of demands on our Medicaid program. Another area where in the last few years we've made severe cuts that have hampered and hurt our old people, our elderly, who have actually built this state and are the people that we are now living on the work that they did. And we need to treat them better than that. We need to make sure we're taking care of those who are less fortunate financially than we are. And the Medicaid program is a big part of the safety net for them in health insurance. So we need to be ever conscious of that. And economic development is my passion. That's what I do in my living. I have been very involved in the development of the ethanol industry in South Dakota, the wind industry in South Dakota. There's just a lot of other areas that we can move forward in economic development, and I'm very interested in working with the people of South Dakota and the people of District 8 on those economic development opportunities that are out there before us. So again, I'm Scott Parsley. I would really appreciate your support on November 6th as we look to seating our next legislature, and I'll stand by for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Our next House candidate is Jean Kroger. Jean?
I'm not Jean, that's okay. I'm Dr. Les Heineman from Flanders. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to come here and answer your questions and have a chance to provide some insight into what we believe and what we feel. Again, I'm Dr. Heineman from Flanders. I was born and raised in northern Moody County. I don't want to tell you how long ago it was, but it was quite a while ago. I went to 8 years of country school, which is, again, something that most people don't know too much about now. I spent 4 years away from this area, going to dental school in Chicago, and I learned quickly when I was there that I missed and really longed for the abilities that you had, or the opportunities that you had in South Dakota. And I saw firsthand what living was like in a large city, and both my family and myself realized that we would rather spend our time in a state like South Dakota. So I came back to my hometown in 1981. Economic times were not very good at the time, but I did start a practice there, and I've been in Flanders ever since. I've always liked the rural areas. In fact, in 1984, I decided to start kind of hobby farming. So together my son and I farm about 500 acres. So most of it is in CRP, but we do actively raise corn and soybeans as well. I had a patient the other day that got up out of the chair, and she happened to be a county officer, actually a county auditor. Not an auditor, but she was in the county courthouse. And she commented, she said, "Why do you want to run for a political office?" And you could tell she had some intent there. So I had to answer that question as succinctly as I could, because I had other patients waiting. And I told her that I believe it's time to run for an office in Pierre. I've been involved in local politics for about 30 years. My daughter just joined me in my dental practice a year ago, and that now has allowed me to have some time off. So I've decided that I've always been interested in politics, and this is the time. I do not have an agenda. I have been very familiar with what is going on in Pierre because I follow it both locally and at the state level. I am a Medicaid provider. If you want to talk about the particular issues, I think that would be very good for our question and answer period. But I am interested in getting involved. I'm familiar with a lot of different issues on the state level. So I guess what I would like you to do is you have 2 votes in this district, Moody, Lake, Minor, and Sanborn, and I would like to be one of those choices. Thank you.
We are not experiencing deja vu. Our next speaker is Gene Kroger. Gene?
Thank you, Jack. I didn't get the long straw, but I got the piece of paper with number 4 on it. I grew up southeast of here in Lenox, and my wife and I retired here to Madison. 9 years ago, we live on the west side of Lake Herman, and we're here by choice. And I'm in South Dakota by choice. My wife and I have been married 56 years. We have 2 sons and 4 grandchildren. My education consists of going to high school in Lenox, South Dakota, and then going on to School of Mines for 1 year, and then the University of South Dakota, where I received a degree in geology. And in my background, I worked in business for 22 years, working with a broad range of people. I spent 10 years with a major corporation working with city officials, contractors, and consulting engineers. I spent 12 years in agribusiness working with farmers, bankers, and government agencies. And then at the age of 45, I went to seminary and became an ordained United Methodist pastor. So technically, I'm an ordained geologist, and there aren't many of us. I spent 17 years as a United Methodist pastor and 4 years as a United Methodist district superintendent. And I've been in the people business all my life. I've served on many different boards and agencies, including 14 years on the Dakota's United Methodist Foundation, which involved investing endowment funds and growing the foundation. I served on the Board of Trustees of Dakota Wesleyan University for 4 years. And I believe in America and its uniqueness in South Dakota. And I think we are unique in South Dakota. In 2008, the Pacific Research Institute, along with Forbes magazine, ranked the states in economic freedom. And South Dakota was ranked #1. They will be ranking us again in 2012. And I would hope that we can maintain that #1 position. I believe in limited government and the freedom to make your own choices. I believe in a balanced budget. And there are always more demands for funds than there are funds. So it's a matter of balancing those demands and those needs. I've had a lot of experience working with budgets and finances, and I can tell you that in Pierre there are a lot of committees, and as a United Methodist pastor, I've had lots of experience with committees.
Okay, we will now open the candidates forum up for questions. The way the questions work, you will say them as loudly as you can, and I will repeat them as best as I can so that everyone will hear. You can direct a question to an individual or to one of the races, the House of Representatives or the Senate races, or to all of the candidates if you wish. If you direct a question to an individual, that person's opponents will be allowed to answer the question as well if they wish, but they are not obligated to. If you ask a general question, then as many of the candidates can speak about it as they wish, and we will put a 90-second time limit on the answers to these questions. So, with that, questions for the candidates. Golden opportunity, democracy in action. This is like one of my classes. Yes, sir.
Initiated Measure 15 was brought by the public. So the public evidently is also upset with what is happening in education. South Dakota in the past has attempted to put in an income tax, and that has been defeated by the general public. This has been brought by the general public, and so from my standpoint, I have a personal view of it. Yes, it is meant to help education and 50% of it toward the Medicaid. Medicaid is something that if the process continues, more responsibility will be put on the state of South Dakota. That is what one of the reasons why the governor made some cuts last year was he was anticipating more expenses in that area than what materialized. That doesn't mean it's not going to materialize in the future. When it comes from the people, then however it is voted on, I will stand by it. In terms of what's happening at the state level, I think it isn't a matter of needing to generate more funds as it is looking out there and prioritizing where those funds are being utilized and where they can be utilized to best help this, South Dakota as a whole. Initiated Measure 15 would raise the sales tax 1% across the board.
Other candidates would like to speak?
Well, with some reservation and mixed feelings, I will support Measure 15, but I guess in saying that and having some reservation about Measure 15, I actually have a better proposal, and I've made that known somewhat through my talks and writings, and that's called BEEF. Better education expects to be funded. And I think it's time that we look at a different funding source for education as a whole. I know all the candidates running for state legislature throughout the entire state, all of them say, I'm in favor of education. But the problem is you got to get real specific as to what you mean. if we're just going to say generically, I'm for education, that's not enough. That doesn't pay the teacher salaries or pays the bills at the schools. I propose that we eliminate property taxes to fund the general levy for education and replace that with a gross revenue levy that would fully fund the school aid formula and fund it to the extent that there would be a 2-year balance in that trust fund, so that the schools know that at least 2 years out where their funding is coming from and at what level. And I would cap that gross revenue levy at 1%, and I would not allow for any exemptions, exclusions, or deductions, so that everybody pays, everyone from that neurosurgeon to the kid that's flipping hamburgers for $8 an hour. They're all going to contribute toward education in this state.
Other candidates? Wes?
Thanks for asking that question, Chuck. I don't have to ride the fence on this one. I'm vehemently opposed to it. I think that to raise taxes in the state of South Dakota that everybody pays to benefit only 2 organizations isn't the way that we handle things. We spread that out with the rest of our tax burdens, and to have a tax that goes to Medicaid providers and education without any explanation of how those funds are going to be spent. There's not one single word in that measure that guarantees that teacher salaries will go up. There's not one single word in that initiated measure that says that the quality of care for our people in our nursing homes and our hospitals will also be better. And or their bills will go down. And so to raise taxes on everybody, I think it laughs in the face of hypocrisy to have a tax that so many people have beat me up on for the last 4 years saying how regressive it is. And now those same people want to increase it by 25% is ridiculous. We don't do things that way in South Dakota. This thing wasn't vetted. It didn't go through a committee process in the House of Origin. It didn't go through the House for a vote or any amendments to it. It didn't go through another House for committee work, and it also wasn't voted on in that House. So the Senate and the House didn't get a chance. I mean, I like the initiated measure process, and I think it's great. I think it's great that we refer items in South Dakota, but to raise a tax by 25%, $180 million a year, with no explanation of how those monies will be spent is ridiculous.
The people will decide on November 6th whether or not they want to raise their taxes. If they do, great. If they don't, then some other ways of financing have to be looked at. The state currently spends 48 cents of every dollar on education for higher education, K through 12, and our technical schools. And they're all important. We spend 38 cents of every dollar helping people with Medicaid and things like that. This particular initiative is saying to those who need the help, we're going to tax you so we can help you. And it says to them, because it affects the poor disproportionately, because their income is less, the 1% for them is a higher percentage of their income. Now, I'm not sure that's the right way to go. It will be the largest tax increase in state history. And once you enact it, it will never go away.
Anyone else? Scott?
As has been said, this was something that was initiated by the people, so the people will speak on this issue. Sales tax is the most regressive tax there is. There's no question about that. Unfortunately, that's what we're saddled with in South Dakota. That's what we have for a tax system. We've dug the hole so deep. I mean, I will tell you that while some would say there's no guarantee that this money is going to teachers' salaries or that it's going to improve health care in the nursing homes, I will guarantee you with what the state legislature has done in the last 2 years, teachers' salaries are not going up and health care is not getting better in this state because we have taken the money away from those programs. So this is one way of starting to fill that hole in. Do I like sales tax? No. Do I like cutting our education programs so that they are becoming almost on life support? No, I don't like that either. And I don't like what we're doing to our elderly. So if the people of this state vote for this sales tax, It will be dollars that we can use to start to shore up the cuts that have been made to education, to start to shore up the cuts that have been made to the elderly in this state and to the low income in this state. We need to find those dollars somewhere. And this is one answer to that. And when the people speak, we'll know if that's the answer they want.
Well, to address Chuck's immediate concern, I think, and that is the regressiveness of the tax. I think Russ pointed that out. It is, in my mind, kind of interesting that the groups of people that have complained for years about the regressiveness of a sales tax are now introducing that to the people to make that decision whether they want to do that. That being said, I'm a Medicaid provider. So, you know, should I be sitting here promoting a 1-cent sales tax so that it will better my bottom line? That is a dilemma. And to be honest with you, I think that the people of South Dakota need to make that decision. There are groups that are supporting this 1-cent sales tax. I know that has become kind of an issue on the public's eye as well. So I understand and realize Chuck's concern about that. And it is a dilemma. It's a dilemma for me. But in the end, I think the people will decide, and that's appropriate.
Thank you, sir, for your question. That got a lot of good answers.
I think the question was how much of a cut in Medicaid and education. You know, we've heard talk about filling this hole that's been dug. In 2011, we cut 10% across state budget, except for Medicaid providers and education. And they were provided what is ironically called the softer landing. They didn't have the full 10% that every other state entity had. We cut $77 million total of ongoing expenditures to Medicaid providers and to education. In 2012, last year, we backfilled $18 million of that in increases to our Medicaid providers and to our educators. We also, outside the formula, increased both of their funding sources by $11 million. So that leaves $59 million out of this hole that's been dug that needs to be filled. In 1 year, we're going to raise taxes by $180 million to fill this hole. I think it's going to take care of the hole immediately. The question I have is ongoing. We're going to keep giving $180 million to two entities, not to roads and bridges, not to corrections, not to any other entities in the state of South Dakota that need support, just two entities, and it's not fair.
Other candidates like to speak to this issue?
I think the honest answer is that we mentioned these two groups, and honestly, yes, it's going to two major macro areas in state government. But they're frustrated. What's happened in Pierre the last 5 to 10, or go back 20 and 30 years since the Republicans have been in charge of the governor's house. And to blame them for their frustration by trying to do something, they're trying to do something. I say with mixed emotions and reservations about supporting Measure 15, but when you leave people no other choice, that's not the right way to go either. And the legislature has failed these groups and these people. Things are not good at the nursing home level. Things are not very good at the school level either. The school aid formula is less today in 2012 than it was in 2007. Now, can any business or household operate on less revenue today than they could in 2007 and still do their operations the right thing? No way. So, let's be honest that these people that are pushing this measure are frustrated, and they're looking for answers as long as we are. And I guess unless we could come up with a better idea, a better approach, I'm going to give them my reservation and vote yes on election day. That's just coming from me. Thank you.
Other candidates on this question?
Russ mentioned the cuts of 10% that were made in the last couple of years. But if we go back to when the school aid formula was set up during the Janklow administration, a certain percentage of the state sales tax was to go to education perpetually. When Governor Rounds came in, he said, we're not doing that anymore. So these cuts didn't start with the current administration. They started with the administration prior. So we aren't just talking about cuts that have taken place in the last couple of years. We're talking about cuts that have been happening again and again and again for the last 12 years. So.
Any other comments? Okay, another question.
Thanks for the question, Jeff. That's a great question to ask. I tell you that nobody that's on this panel and nobody that I share my chambers with or that's in the House of Representatives goes to peer to cut education funding. Nobody else claims to hold the answer for solving the educational problems that we have as far as funding goes. But I'll tell you, since I have been in the legislature, which is 6 years now that I've served, every year we've either been sued or had an initiated measure or a referral that dealt with the baseline funding for education, which gives me great pause, and so does it to my colleagues, both Democrat and Republican, that we don't want to stick money into a base formula not knowing what the next year's referral or initiated measure will do. Give us 1 year. Seriously, give us 1 year where we can put back into the formula like we did this year. And I'm tired of circumventing it and going outside the formula. Like I said, last year we had to go outside the formula for Medicaid providers, outside the formula for education. Every last dollar that we had that was surplus last year when we left peer went to higher education, education, and Medicaid providers. Give us a year that you don't refer something or initiate a measure, and I think that you'll see great things happen.
Comments?
One of the things in that I have been working on, and I'm not exactly sure that I know exactly how to put it into place, but there are other states in that tax internet sales. Currently in South Dakota, if you purchase something over the internet or you purchase it out of state, you are supposed to come home, go online, print out the use tax form, and submit that to the state of South Dakota. There are people that do that. And since we are an internet society and there's more and more sales over the internet, we should have a way where, like some of the other states that are out there, when you purchase it online, the sales tax is figured and collected. I know it's been a discussion in peer before, and one of the things that I remember of the discussion were the cities trying to figure out how, if there were going to be sales tax on internet sales, how they got the benefit of it as well. So what I've done in my thinking is looked at it from not so much the cities, because not every city has additional sales taxes, but every city is located in a county in the state. Every county has a need. My thought, and one of the things that I'm looking toward, is 4% to the general fund, just as if you would pay it any other purchase, 1% to the counties on a per square mile basis, not population.
Certainly, the present tax structure that we have is what we would come into peer thinking what we're going to be using. Obviously, the referred measures, the initiated measures would come into play, but I have always been a proponent of economic development. And in a state like South Dakota, I think we're fortunate that we have a good business climate. Some of the states, my daughter is in a convent in LA. The business climate in California, to say the least, is not very good. They're broke and they have difficulty meeting their obligations. I think we're fortunate that we can here provide a balanced budget and I would like to see economic development to increase the tax revenue. A good example is that my son just built a house. Actually, it was a custom touch home that we moved here from Madison. That product alone provided many dollars to this community as well as our state in sales tax. That's a good example of being optimistic about our economy and moving forward. So I guess I would propose more economic development to be able to address the issue of taxes.
Thanks, Jeff, for the question. You know, if you read some studies, and I just read one here recently, the Budget and Policy Project in South Dakota, and they say the research shows that the best return you get on investment in economic development is in education. That pays the best return of any investment you can make in economic development. We're not doing that today. We're not investing in education. We put some money in education this year that had a bunch of riders on it. If teachers perform at certain levels, if you teach a certain class, you're going to get a bonus. If you don't teach that class, you're not going to get a bonus. So what happened? I got referred. You know, sometimes if you don't pass laws that are really good, they're going to get referred. So that's one area. But I think the other area, today we have $134 million in our surplus funds. We have about $800 million in trust funds. And we have a checkbook balance that's somewhere north of $800 million. And yes, some of that's obligated, but there is a lot of money in that checkbook. So I think it's priorities. I mean, if the 1 cent sales tax doesn't pass, we're going to have to look at priorities. And we're going to have to say, is the priority education? Is the priority taking care of the elderly and the low income and Medicaid? Or what is our priority? And for me, it's education and taking care of our people. And then we work on the economic development of this state.
Well, we're in the 21st century, but we're using a 19th century tax system to fund education. You know, we didn't show up on a horse and buggy here tonight to attend this meeting, and yet that's the times that we're using to finance education in the state. As I mentioned, under the approach with beef, we would eliminate property taxes as the funding source for the general levy on a local level and replace that with a gross revenue levy of less than 1% on all income earned and unearned through business, salaries, investments, whatnot. You would still have property taxes financing education to the extent of taking care of the bond levy, capital outlay levy, special education, or if a local school district still chooses a property tax opt-out to further fund education. But that school aid formula, SAF, would be financed with this revenue source, and this revenue source can only be used for school funding, period. Now, I know this is just a concept, a very rough one, and I would ask for your input and your suggestions if it needs to be studied or researched further. But again, just to say that we're for education or we're going to hope upon the blue moon that things are going to get taken care of in future years by using the same tax system is just wishful thinking. And we're going to have the same argument 2 years from now. So, thank you.
Just a quick response. We have some good money in reserves, and I can guarantee you we're going to need it. If you're paying attention to what the federal government is doing, we are $16 trillion in debt. That's the number 16 followed by 12 zeros. There have been things that have been happening in the last few years that you may not be aware of. We financed our house, refinanced it in 2010. We had a mortgage with Wells Fargo. When it was all said and done, our mortgage was no longer with Wells Fargo, but with Freddie Mac. Wells Fargo still administers the loan because they're making as much money administrating the loan as they would by handling it. Now, you and I as taxpayers are responsible for 50% of the private mortgages in this country. And we're going to see some things that we've never seen before as a result of our debt. But if you want to see what's coming, just take a look at Greece, and Spain and Portugal and Italy and some of the European countries who have spent more than they made, spent more than they took in. They have a history of doing that, and we're repeating some of those same things, and it's going to affect us as a state.
Okay, another question from the audience.
Texting is obviously deadly. There's been a lot of research out there, and the research shows that it takes an average of 5 seconds to read the text. Now, that's not to respond to it, but that's to read the text. If you're traveling at 60 miles an hour, you're traveling 88 feet every second. If you're looking at that text for 5 seconds, you're traveling 440 feet without watching where you're going. And when you're traveling that far, you miss pedestrians, animals, stop signs, yield signs, intersections. There are lots of reports weekly of accidents involving people on cell phones. Am I for a ban on texting while driving? The answer is yes. Can the officers enforce it? If the officers see you, stop you, write down the time they are there. Your cell phone text puts a time on it as well. So your cell phone records, if that matches the time you're stopped, it's enforceable. So, am I for having a ban on texting while driving? The answer is yes.
Other comments on this issue?
I'll just say that I agree with Roy, and there was a measure that come up in the legislature, I would vote for it. I text, but I'm driving a tractor that's going 5 miles an hour. And even then, I need to pull over and stop what I'm doing, which I should all the time. And so, anyhow, thank you.
Thanks for the question. Surprisingly, this is one of the issues that I've had more people talk, not the most, but I've had a lot more people talk to me about this than I ever expected I would have on the campaign trail. And it's been people of all ages who've talked to me about it, talking not about just kids texting, but I had a person the other day say, I was driving down the road or highway and I saw a guy driving a semi and he was texting. And there is a lot of concern today out there about this issue. Will it stop people from texting if we pass a law? No. I mean, does it stop people from driving after they've had too much to drink? No. Do we have a law? No, it doesn't. But it does give law enforcement, it would give law enforcement the ability to have some force behind the times that they pick somebody up when they are texting. So if a texting ban were to come up in the legislature, I would support it.
Thank you.
Right now, we're at a standoff between the cities wanting the legislature to do something and the legislator wanting the cities to do something. And there's an old saying that says you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. And I think the legislature is going to have to step up to bat and say, we're not going to please all the people all the time, and we're going to do something about this. I was talking to a county sheriff this week. He said, I'd like to see you do something about all of the things that distract drivers. He says, you'd be surprised how many people I see driving down the interstate reading a book, or reading a map, or texting, or, you know, the time it takes for something to happen when you're distracted, that's an accident. It just happens. If it wasn't an accident, it wouldn't happen. But you can't be distracted when you're driving. And it's particularly habit forming for teens because, you know, they'll sit there on the couch and text each other.
Anything else?
Thanks for the question. As one of the probably the only person, I guess, that's up here that's actually voted on texting and driving issues in the legislature. I've never voted to ban texting. And I don't want to disagree with my driver's ed instructor, so I won't in his entirety. I really do think it's a social engineering issue. I really think that if we're taking this backwards to ban it altogether, because there's so many people that come in and talk about, you know, the ability to enforce texting and driving. And we already have something on the books called careless driving. And the officers aren't enforcing that right now because of the ability to prove that somebody was actually texting. I think that if we take this same way as we did the seatbelt issue a number of decades ago, when I was young, I didn't wear a seatbelt, and now I don't even drive down my driveway without making sure every one of my kids has their seatbelts on. We started at the grade school level, and we moved our way up. Now everybody puts on their seatbelts. I think that's what you got to look at. Driving is a privilege, not a right. And so we start with our kids while they're being trained on how to drive and how to drive safely and work from there.
Certainly, everyone knows that texting is inherently dangerous. That's not the question. I guess I would come to the legislature with an open mind and look at the pros and the cons, the arguments that they have, and I probably would not satisfy my daughter who loves to text, but I would at least listen to the arguments. Question? Yep.
I understand where you're coming from. Kathy and I have 8 children, and we have put all of them through college. It is a tough situation. I don't know that the state of South Dakota is in a position. This comes down to what's happening at the national level. And the funding for education and the ability of students to get an education is something that needs to be addressed at the national level. So with that, I don't know that the state of South Dakota is going to be of much assistance to you. When we started out with our first daughter, and that we decided that we would use what she had in savings first and then move into student loans, we found out that didn't work, because you're only eligible for your student loan in the year that you're applying for it. So from daughter number 2 on through to the youngest one, we've taken out the FAFSA loan with each of the students as they went along. And each one of them has handled it differently, but they're all doing well. So.
Since this is the last time I'm going to have a chance to get up here again, I want to thank AAUW, and I want to thank the rest of the candidates for running and for coming out tonight. You know, we don't agree on every issue, and that's what this is all about, is not agreeing on every issue, because there are, as someone much wiser than me once said, there is no sheet of paper so thin it doesn't have 2 sides. So there are 2 sides to everything. Jared, to your question, you know, I don't know. I would be interested in looking at what the state is getting for a return on some of their investments today, and is there a way we can turn some of those dollars into loan funds that would help to return maybe a little better investment to the state, but also give you guys a little bit lower interest rate on some loans. My kids, Belle's kids, our kids, borrowed money to go to college. I don't know that that's a bad thing. We helped them as much as we could, but it wasn't, you know, they have some responsibility now, plus they also have a credit rating, because they're paying back their loans. So we don't want them to get in trouble with those loans, but we do think it was okay for them to have to borrow some. For your folks, that's the ones I really feel sorry for, with 4 kids in college at the same time. You know, that's the tough part.
Well, 3 sons, 4 years, loan each year, parent plus loan, mortgage and farm. And that's about what it all added up to. I think the secondary question to your comment was, what are we doing here at a higher education level to make tuition and educational costs more reasonable? And again, the state has failed. When I went to school 30 years ago here, things were a lot more reasonable. Certainly the costs were less then, but the approach to higher education was a lot more honorable back then, in the sense that the state stepped up to the plate to help finance tuition. Each year, little by little, the state backs out as to how they're helping to fund higher education in the state. And little by little, the students and the families are having to pick up that burden. And it's becoming a noose around their necks. And I really feel sorry for a lot of students because they're coming out of college with loans that they cannot pay or keep up with anymore.
I was in the exact same boat as you. Paid for all but a $1,200 Pell loan by myself. My parents helped me with what they could, and I paid for my graduate and undergraduate courses by myself. I fought the entire time that I've been in the legislature with our scholarship programs for opportunity scholarships. I actually had a bill and got it passed to expand the career and tech ed portions of the opportunity scholarships to help kids like you out. I think that where I can help you is in what I do for a living, plus what I can do for you out here, and that's make sure that we have the right climate to recruit businesses into campus university towns so that they can hire young people just like you to work for them while you're going to college.
Any comments?
I do understand your dilemma, Mr. Sutton. It is an issue, but I have looked at other states because I, in particular, had a daughter that wanted to go to anywhere but South Dakota, and she quickly realized that it is quite a bargain that we have here. Dental school is not, you mentioned higher education, I would assume professional school would be part of that. There is no dental school in South Dakota, so we did look at other states. A couple of comments we had, California, their system is broke because they provided the first 2 years of college free to anyone that wants to go to a junior college. I had a friend in dental school that did that. But now look what, they can't do that anymore. They quit doing that. Like I say, their system is broke. So I think we have to maintain a fiscal process here that we can afford to be able to educate our children. I think that people in other states have realized how cheap, I guess, our education is, but I certainly will support funding of higher education as best we can.
Any other comments? Please join me in applause in thanking our candidates. That concludes our event for this evening.
I'd just like to make one comment that all of us agree on. And on the news tonight, it said that the prison population in South Dakota has gone up 500% in the last 30 years. And I think every one of us here is in agreement that it's better to educate than incarcerate. Have a great evening and please vote.